Emma's fingers gripped the edge of the hospital bed as another contraction seized her. A sharp, biting pain cut through her, the kind that made her gasp and clutch the sheets like a lifeline. Her mind raced with thoughts, but they all led back to the same place, the cold, empty feeling inside her chest. The room felt like a vacuum, drawing all the warmth, all the hope out of her. Alone. That's what she was. The sterile white walls around her seemed to close in, suffocating her with their dullness. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was a constant reminder that time was moving forward, but where was he? The father of the child she was about to give birth to? Where was he now? Another contraction gripped her, even harder than before. Emma bit her lip, trying not to cry out, but the pain was unbearable. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was just after 10:30 p.m. She had expected him to be here by now. He should have been here hours ago, and yet he wasn't. Where was he? Her mind flashed back to earlier that day. She had been on the phone with him, her voice weak from the exhaustion of the past few weeks. The due date had come and gone, and now, with each passing moment, she was inching closer to the moment she'd been dreading, the moment when she would have to bring this baby into the world without the one person who should have been there. The person who had promised. He'd told her he was coming, that he wouldn't miss this. He had told her that no matter what, he would be with her. His reassuring voice, so warm, so confident, echoed in her mind. Yet the text she received earlier that day had shattered all of that. I can't leave her. I'm sorry, Em. Her phone had buzzed as she lay in the hospital bed, awaiting the inevitable. The message had hit her like a slap in the face. For a moment, she had stared at the screen, disbelief clouding her thoughts. She had tried to call him, over and over, but his phone had gone straight to voicemail. Where was he? The pain intensified, cutting through her thoughts once again. She gasped, her breath shallow. The room was quiet except for the sound of the heart monitor and the distant footsteps of nurses in the hallway. The night seemed to stretch on forever. She should have been able to take comfort in the fact that there were medical professionals in the room, that everything was under control. But she couldn't. Not with the feeling of abandonment gnawing at her insides. It wasn't the first time she had felt this way. It wasn't the first time she had been left in the wake of his neglect. But this was different. This was her moment. Their moment. And he wasn't here. Her mind wandered back to their relationship. It had never been perfect, but she had always believed in the love they shared. He had been her rock, her partner. Until the cracks started to show. Until his late nights at the office became something else. The secret phone calls, the sudden disappearances. She had confronted him about it. But he had always denied everything. Said she was being paranoid. Yet, when she found the messages, when she found out about the woman, everything changed. That was months ago. And now, as she lay here alone, she couldn't help but wonder if she had been foolish to hold on, foolish to hope he would change. She had promised herself that she would never let a man hurt her like this. Yet here she was, alone, in the most vulnerable moment of her life, hoping that somehow, some miracle would happen. Another contraction, and this one was stronger. Her entire body tensed, and she clenched her teeth to keep from crying out. This was it. The baby was coming. But there was still no sign of him. No sign of the man who had promised to be there when it mattered the most. Emma, a nurse's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and soothing. Emma turned her head to see the nurse standing at her side, her expression kind, though Emma could detect a hint of concern in the way the nurse studied her. You're doing great. Just a few more pushes, and you'll be holding your baby. Emma nodded, her vision blurred by the sheen of sweat on her forehead. She wanted to believe the nurse's words, wanted to believe that the end was near. But the emptiness inside her was overwhelming. She had imagined this moment so differently. In her mind, he had been there, holding her hand, whispering reassurances. But instead, she had received nothing but silence. No calls, no texts. Nothing. The nurse adjusted the bed, preparing for the final stages of labor. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. There was no time for that now. The baby was coming, and it was happening whether he was there or not. Her body tensed once again as another contraction hit, more intense than the last. The pain was blinding. She wanted to scream, but she gritted her teeth instead, forcing herself to stay focused. She could do this. She had to. She had no choice. As the nurse worked with the doctors to guide her through the process, Emma's mind wandered again. What was he doing right now? Was he still at the party with her? Was she laughing, touching him the way she used to touch her? The thought made her sick to her stomach. She had always believed in love. She had always believed in second chances. But now, she wasn't so sure. Would he ever realize what he had done? Would he ever understand the pain he had caused her, the child they had together, the family they were supposed to be? But there was no time for those thoughts now. There was only pain. Only the baby coming. Only the reality that this moment, this life-changing event, was happening right here, right now, and he wasn't here to witness it. He wasn't here to share it with her. Her breath came in sharp bursts as the next contraction arrived, the pain so intense it felt like her body was being torn apart. She cried out, a sound that broke through the sterile calm of the room. The nurse urged her to push. Emma did as she was told, each push harder than the last, until she could hear the distant sound of the baby crying. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, they were different. These were tears of relief, of joy, of something she couldn't quite explain. She had done it. She had brought her child into the world, alone but strong. She could hear the soft cries of the baby now, the sound filling the room. It was a new beginning. But even as she lay there, breathing heavily, trying to grasp the reality of what had just happened, the question lingered in her mind. Where was he? The baby's cries echoed in the room, a sound so pure and innocent, it brought a wave of unexpected emotion over Emma. She hadn't realized how desperately she had needed this moment, this tiny life in her arms. For a split second, she forgot about everything else, the betrayal, the abandonment, the fear. There was only the warmth of the baby's body against hers, the soft whimpers that made her heart swell with love. But as the nurse gently took the baby from her arms to clean and weigh him, the reality of her situation rushed back in. She was still alone. The silence in the room felt deafening, even though the baby's cries were still echoing softly in the background. She stared at the empty chair beside her, the one where he was supposed to be, his hand resting gently on hers, telling her how proud he was, how happy they were going to be as a family. But he hadn't been there. And now, she was left holding her son, her heart aching with a mixture of love, sorrow, and bitterness. The nurse moved around her, her movements fluid and practiced. She was speaking to Emma in a soft, almost comforting voice, explaining the next steps, but Emma could barely hear her over the sound of her own thoughts. Where was he? It had been nearly an hour since the baby was born. The room was quiet now, save for the occasional shuffle of the nurse and the soft whimper of the baby as he settled into his first moments of life. Emma's mind was a whirlwind. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let this define her, that she would stay strong. But every part of her body was screaming for him to come and apologize, to fix this, to be the man she had believed he was. She had imagined this moment for months. But never in her wildest dreams had she expected to feel this, alone. The nurse finally finished with the baby, handing him back to Emma with a warm smile. Emma took him into her arms, her eyes locked on the little face staring up at her with wide, innocent eyes. She had never felt such a deep sense of responsibility. She had never felt more vulnerable, and yet, more powerful, in the same breath. "This is your little one," the nurse said, her voice filled with tenderness. He's perfect. Emma nodded, but her smile was barely a flicker. She couldn't bring herself to feel entirely happy, not yet. Her mind was still consumed with the questions she couldn't answer. Where was he? What was he doing? And most importantly, what would happen when he finally came back? The nurse must have sensed the heaviness in the room because she paused, looking at Emma with an understanding gaze. "I'll leave you alone for a while," she said quietly. "Just let me know if you need anything." Emma didn't speak as the nurse slipped out of the room, leaving her alone with the baby and her thoughts. She leaned back against the pillows, the weight of the newborn in her arms a steady reminder of the life she now had to protect. Her heart swelled with love for him, but it also ached with the knowledge that his father wasn't here to share in the joy. She couldn't help but wonder how long it would take him to show up. Would he come rushing in, full of apologies and excuses, or would he be distant, pretending like nothing had happened? She looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly midnight now. The hours had dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Her phone had remained silent. No texts. No calls. Nothing. The silence was deafening, a reminder that she wasn't just physically alone in that room, she was emotionally abandoned. What had she done wrong? Had she misread everything? Had she really believed that he could change, that he could love her and their child the way she had always wanted? Had she been blind to the truth, or was this just the inevitable consequence of trying to hold on to something that wasn't meant to last? The more she thought about it, the more the anger started to bubble up. She could feel it rising within her, a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal that made her hands shake as she gently rocked the baby in her arms. How could he do this to her? How could he stay with her, promise her the world, and then walk away when it mattered most? But then there was a shift, a moment of clarity. She wasn't just angry. She was hurt. Hurt that someone she loved so deeply could leave her in the one moment when she needed him the most. Hurt that she had given him so much, only to be left with nothing in return. Hurt that the family she had dreamed of for so long was slipping through her fingers. And yet, there was something else, a small flicker of hope, a quiet voice deep inside her that reminded her that she had made it this far. She had brought this child into the world. She had done it alone, and she had survived. That's when the door creaked open. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her heart leaped in her chest. She looked up quickly, but it wasn't him. The nurse had returned, her face a little more concerned than before. "Is everything okay?" the nurse asked gently, noticing the tension in Emma's face. Emma nodded quickly, her lips pressed together in a tight smile. "Yeah, everything's fine," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm just tired." The nurse didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press. She glanced at the baby in Emma's arms and then looked back at her with a soft, understanding gaze. "I'll give you some time to rest. I'll check in again in a bit," she said before exiting the room once more. The moment the door clicked shut, Emma's gaze dropped to the baby in her arms. She stared at his tiny face, the soft little breaths he took as he settled into a deep sleep. "This is my child," she thought. "I did this for him. I did this alone." And yet, the question still haunted her, where was he? The night stretched on, with every hour that passed feeling like an eternity. Emma lay back in the bed, the baby nestled against her, and closed her eyes for a moment, trying to escape the turmoil in her mind. But sleep wouldn't come. It was as if the weight of everything, the loneliness, the betrayal, the confusion, was too much to bear. She reached for her phone again, unable to stop herself. She opened up her messages, hoping, praying that somehow there would be a text from him. But there was nothing. The screen remained dark, the silence suffocating her once again. She closed the phone with a snap, frustrated tears welling in her eyes. How much longer could she wait? How much longer could she cling to the hope that he would come back and fix this? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the door. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. This time, there was no mistaking it. She knew who it was. He was finally here. But when the door opened, it wasn't him. It was a doctor. "Miss Emma, how are we feeling?" the doctor asked, stepping into the room with a clipboard in hand. Emma blinked in surprise, her mind racing. She hadn't expected the doctor to come in so late. "I'm fine," Emma said, forcing a smile. She didn't have the energy to explain the emotional whirlwind that had been churning inside her for hours. "Just waiting." The doctor nodded, taking notes on the clipboard. "Your recovery is going well. We'll check in with you in the morning for the final rounds, but for now, I just want to make sure you're comfortable." Emma nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. He still hadn't come. The doctor finished his checkup and left the room, leaving her alone again. Her fingers tightened around the edges of the baby blanket, her thoughts a jumbled mess. She had done everything right. She had given birth, she had survived. And yet, the one thing she had wanted most, his presence, his love, his reassurance, was still missing. She couldn't do this much longer. The silence was eating her alive. And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her heart leaped as she picked it up, but when she saw the name on the screen, her excitement faltered. It wasn't him. It was a message from her best friend. "I just heard, how are you? Please call me. I'm here if you need me." Emma's shoulders slumped. She typed back a quick message, but her thoughts were still consumed by the one question that wouldn't let go. Where was he? The soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound in the sterile room as Emma lay still, her eyes fixed on the baby sleeping peacefully in the bassinet beside her. The pale light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the hospital was quiet, the world still unaware of the turmoil Emma was going through inside these walls. The night had dragged on endlessly. Her mind had raced through every possible scenario, replaying the events of the previous hours over and over again. He hadn't come. He hadn't called. And now, it was morning, and she was still alone. Emma's hand gently brushed the baby's tiny fingers, the only comfort she could find in this silent chaos. She had always imagined this moment so differently. In her dreams, he had been here, by her side, offering comfort and love, holding their newborn son in his arms, promising that they would make it through everything together. But none of that had happened. The only thing she was left with was the empty space where his presence should have been. She sat up slowly, the ache in her body still a reminder of the long, exhausting night. Her legs were stiff, but she didn't care. She needed to stand. She needed to do something to distract herself from the crushing weight of the emptiness around her. The door to the room opened quietly, and a nurse stepped in, carrying a small tray of breakfast. Emma didn't look up immediately, she was lost in thought, the silence pressing down on her like a heavy weight. "Good morning, Emma," the nurse said softly, placing the tray on the table beside her. Emma didn't respond right away, still staring at the baby. "Emma," the nurse repeated, her voice a little more insistent this time. "How are you feeling?" Emma turned her head slowly, meeting the nurse's gaze. She forced a smile, but it felt hollow, fake. "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft and tired. "Just tired." The nurse nodded, clearly sensing that Emma wasn't in the mood for conversation. "I'll leave you to rest. Just let me know if you need anything." As the nurse turned to leave, Emma's eyes followed her, lingering on the door as it clicked shut. The isolation in the room felt suffocating. She glanced at the baby again, the soft sounds of his breathing filling the silence. She felt a pang of guilt. She should be grateful. She should be happy that her son was here, that he was healthy. But the bitterness, the anger, the hurt, everything she had been feeling last night, was still so raw. She reached for the small tray of food the nurse had left, but her appetite was non-existent. She wasn't hungry. She didn't want to eat. She just wanted answers. Where was he? Why hadn't he come? Her phone buzzed suddenly, and Emma's heart jumped. She grabbed it quickly, almost desperate to see a message from him. But as she unlocked the screen, her heart sank. It wasn't him. It was a notification from her bank, a reminder about her credit card payment due in a few days. She tossed the phone aside with a sigh, frustration bubbling up inside her. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for hours was starting to spill over. She stood up abruptly, ignoring the pain in her legs as she crossed the room to the window. She pulled the curtains back, letting the pale light of the morning flood the room. The hospital grounds outside were quiet, still. There was no sign of him. She didn't know why she expected to see him outside, standing there, waiting for her. He wasn't coming. And that thought hit her like a cold wave, washing over her with brutal finality. The hours had passed, and he hadn't come. No calls. No texts. No visits. Nothing. She felt stupid for even considering the possibility that he would show up, that somehow, he would realize what he had done and come rushing back, full of apologies and regret. She should have known better. She should have known that this was who he was. But even as those thoughts echoed in her mind, another, quieter voice whispered to her. Maybe he's just scared. Maybe he's ashamed. Maybe he doesn't know how to fix this. Emma shook her head, the thought slipping away like water off stone. There was no fixing this. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. She walked back to the bassinet and gazed down at her baby once more. His small hands curled into tiny fists, his face scrunched up in his sleep, and for a moment, everything else faded away. This little boy was her future. She couldn't keep holding on to the past, to the hope that he would change, that he would come back and fix everything. She had to focus on this, on him. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts, and she looked up, startled. The door creaked open slowly, and a familiar face stepped into the room. It was Sarah, her best friend. Emma's heart gave a little lurch of relief. "Hey," Sarah said softly, closing the door behind her. She had a warm smile on her face, but Emma could see the concern in her eyes. "How are you doing?" Emma nodded weakly, not trusting herself to speak. Sarah took a few steps forward and then paused, glancing at the baby. "He's perfect, Emma. He really is. You've done an amazing job." Tears stung Emma's eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. "I don't feel amazing," she said hoarsely, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel lost." Sarah nodded, moving to sit next to Emma on the edge of the bed. "I know. I can't even imagine what you're going through right now." She paused, glancing at the baby. "But you're not alone. You've got me. You've got him." She gestured toward the baby, her eyes softening with sympathy. Emma swallowed hard. "But, he's not here, Sarah. The one person who should have been here, he's not here. He didn't even come when I needed him most." Sarah's face tightened, and she reached out to take Emma's hand. "He will come," she said gently. "Maybe. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he will. He has to. He's the father, Emma. He can't just disappear." Emma shook her head, her chest tightening. "I don't know. Maybe he's gone for good. Maybe he's really just not coming back." The silence between them stretched on for a moment, Sarah watching Emma with quiet understanding. "Have you heard from him?" Sarah asked finally, her voice tentative. Emma bit her lip, her mind racing. No. No, she hadn't. She hadn't heard anything from him since the night before, when he sent that cold, heartless message. She didn't want to admit it out loud, but the silence was starting to feel suffocating. "No," Emma murmured, her voice breaking slightly. I haven't heard from him. He didn't even text. He didn't even show up, Sarah. Sarah's face hardened slightly. That's not okay, Emma. That's not how you should be treated. Not now. Not ever. Emma could feel her emotions rising, threatening to spill over. I know, she whispered, her voice trembling. But it's too late. I don't think I can go back. I don't think I can ever trust him again. Sarah squeezed Emma's hand tightly. You don't have to make those decisions right now. You need to focus on yourself, on this little guy. The rest will come. But don't let him make you feel small, Emma. Don't let him make you doubt yourself. You're stronger than that. Emma took a shaky breath, closing her eyes for a moment. It was hard to think about strength. It was hard to think about moving on when all she felt was the gaping hole he had left in her heart. But Sarah was right. There was more at stake now than just her broken heart. There was this little life, this tiny person who depended on her. The door to the room opened again, and this time, it was a doctor. Miss Emma, the doctor said kindly, glancing at the baby. I just wanted to check in with you. How are you feeling? Emma turned her attention back to him, forcing herself to focus. I'm okay. Just a little tired. The doctor nodded, then glanced at Sarah. It's good that you have support, he said gently. But you should really try to get some rest. You've been through a lot, and your body needs to heal. Emma nodded quietly, but her mind was elsewhere. The baby. The empty seat. The silence. It was all too much. The doctor left the room, and Emma and Sarah sat together in a silence that was somehow both comforting and oppressive. And then, as if the universe itself was mocking her, Emma's phone buzzed once again. This time, it was him. Emma stared at her phone, the screen blinking with the light of an incoming message. Her heart raced, her thoughts a swirl of anticipation and dread. Could this be it? Could this be the moment he was finally going to reach out and explain everything? What if he's just sending a message because he knows he's supposed to? What if this is just another attempt to string me along? She glanced at the baby, who was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling gently with each breath. Her gaze softened. This child, this tiny life, was all that mattered now. All the hurt, all the confusion, it all felt so much smaller compared to the overwhelming love she felt for him. Still, the unanswered questions about his father lingered, hanging in the air like a thick fog. She took a deep breath, the smell of hospital sterilization and antiseptic sharp in her nostrils. The soft beep of the machines monitoring her vital signs in the background felt like an intrusive reminder that, while life moved on around her, there was a stillness in her heart that she couldn't ignore. Slowly, she unlocked her phone, the screen revealing his name. Thomas. Her stomach tightened at the sight of his name, as if it had become a symbol of everything she had lost. And everything she was still desperately holding on to. She tapped the message open. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Can we talk? I need to explain. The words seemed so simple, but they hit Emma like a tidal wave. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her thumb hovering above the keyboard. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to tell him that it was too late, that he didn't deserve a second chance, that he had already made his choices. But instead, she found herself simply waiting. Waiting for what? An apology? An explanation? Or maybe, deep down, she was waiting for him to prove that he still cared. The silence of the room stretched on, the baby's steady breathing filling the space with a quiet rhythm. Emma's mind spun in circles. She was flooded with so many emotions that it was hard to process them all. Anger. Betrayal. But also, strangely, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment things changed. Sarah, still sitting beside her, glanced at her phone and then back at Emma. Her expression was soft but filled with concern. "What did he say?" Emma looked up, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "He says he wants to talk. He says he messed up." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but Sarah could hear the mix of hope and hesitation in it. Sarah's brows furrowed slightly. "Emma, you don't owe him anything. You've been through enough. He's the one who messed up. He's the one who has to prove himself to you, not the other way around." "I know," Emma said, squeezing the phone tightly in her hand. "But part of me still wants to believe him. Part of me still wants him to be here, to be the person he promised he would be. I want him to want to fix things. But I'm scared, Sarah. I'm scared he's just going to hurt me again. I don't know if I can survive that." Sarah took Emma's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I get it. It's hard to let go of someone you love. But remember, Emma, you've already done the hardest part. You've brought this baby into the world. You've made it through one of the most difficult experiences any person can go through. You've shown yourself how strong you are. You don't need him to complete you. You're already whole." The words stung with truth, and Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting them sink in. The weight of everything, the hospital bed, the empty space beside her, the stillness of the room, seemed to fade for a brief moment, leaving her with a glimmer of clarity. She was strong. She had done it. She had brought this child into the world on her own. Maybe she didn't need him. But even as she thought that, another part of her ached with the longing for something she hadn't been able to hold on to. Her heart still wanted him. She still wanted him to love her. She wanted him to be the man she had always hoped he would be. "Can I see the message?" Sarah asked gently. Emma handed the phone over, and Sarah read it quickly. She sighed. "He's not really saying anything, Emma. He's just apologizing. He's not explaining anything. He's not giving you anything you can hold on to. Do you really want to open that door again?" Emma swallowed hard, the lump in her throat growing. "I don't know. I'm scared, Sarah. I'm scared of what I might feel if I talk to him. I'm scared that I'll believe him again, that I'll get sucked back into this mess." Sarah set the phone down gently and turned to face Emma fully. "You're strong, Emma. Stronger than you think. You don't have to answer him right away. Take your time. Don't let him rush you into anything. If you decide to talk to him, you do it on your terms. But don't let him come back in just because he says the right words. He has to prove it." Emma nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the phone back on the bed beside her. Her heart was torn in two directions. A part of her wanted to cut all ties with him, to move on and focus on building a future for herself and her son. But another part of her, the part that still loved him, still wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, couldn't let go so easily. "What do I do, Sarah?" Emma whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "What if I make the wrong choice? What if I let him back in, and it's just more pain?" Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes softening with empathy. "There's no easy answer. You have to do what feels right for you. But remember, you don't have to make this decision now. Take your time. He's not going anywhere. And neither is that baby." She smiled warmly at the little one in the bassinet. "You've got all the time in the world to figure this out. But whatever you decide, know that you have me. You have your son. You have a family, even if it's not the one you expected." Emma wiped her eyes, feeling the warmth of Sarah's words settle in her chest. She was right. She didn't need to make a decision right now. She didn't need to let him back in on his terms. This was her life. She had already survived the hardest part. She didn't have to let fear or hope dictate her decisions. But even as she thought that, a small voice inside her whispered again. What if he's changed? What if this is the chance he needs to prove he can be the father and partner you've always wanted? The room felt heavy with the silence, and the baby's quiet breathing was a small comfort, grounding her in the moment. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she did know one thing: she couldn't do this alone forever. She could stand on her own 2 feet, but she couldn't carry the weight of everything on her own. Suddenly, Emma's phone buzzed again, the message notification flashing on the screen. It was from him. Her heart skipped a beat. "I just want to talk, Emma. I'm sorry. I need you to hear me out. Can we meet? Please. For the baby's sake, if not ours." Her fingers shook as she read the words again, and she looked up at Sarah, her heart caught in a web of confusion and uncertainty. He wants to meet. He says it's for the baby. Sarah's expression hardened. "Emma, don't let him manipulate you. You don't have to meet him if you're not ready. He's not going to get what he wants by pushing you. Don't let him guilt you into it." Emma exhaled, the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. She had to decide. She had to decide whether to give him another chance, or whether to cut ties completely and start fresh. "I don't know if I'm ready," Emma admitted softly. "I don't know if I can trust him again." Sarah nodded. "You don't have to be ready. And you don't have to decide now. You're doing great. You've already made it through the hardest part. You'll know when you're ready. Trust yourself." Emma let out a long breath, her mind still racing with possibilities. But as she looked at her baby, she realized something. Whatever happened, she would protect this little one. No matter what Thomas said, no matter what he did, she would keep this child safe. She was a mother now, and nothing would change that. For now, she would take her time. She would figure this out on her own terms. The days felt like they were slipping through Emma's fingers, each one blending into the next with the quiet rhythm of hospital life. The beep of the heart monitor, the scent of antiseptic, the sound of her baby's soft, steady breathing, everything was so normal. But inside, everything felt like it was on the verge of collapse. She was living in a fog, half expecting the world to come crashing down around her at any moment. The message from Thomas still sat on her phone, unanswered. Every time she glanced at it, her stomach clenched, and the weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She had read it over and over again, each time with a different emotion pulsing through her. "Can we meet? Please. For the baby's sake, if not ours." He had said that. And each time, she couldn't help but wonder. Was it genuine? Was this the man who had abandoned her on the night of their son's birth? Or was it the man who had promised her he would be there, who said he would never leave? She hadn't responded. She didn't know what to say. But the silence between them had only deepened her sense of isolation. There were no words coming from him except these desperate pleas. But did those words mean anything, or were they just a way for him to relieve his guilt? The baby shifted in the bassinet beside her, a small whimper escaping his lips, and Emma's heart softened immediately. She reached down to gently stroke his little hand, the warmth of his skin grounding her. This was all that mattered now, him. The way his tiny fingers wrapped around hers. The way his little chest rose and fell with each breath. She had to be strong for him. She had to make the right decision. But what was the right decision? Could she really let Thomas back into their lives? Could she trust him again after everything he had put her through? A knock on the door broke her thoughts. Sarah entered, her face slightly concerned but still warm with familiarity. "Hey," she greeted Emma, her eyes lingering on the phone for a second. "Have you heard back from him yet?" Emma didn't answer right away. She was lost in her thoughts, trying to untangle the emotions that had been tying her up in knots for days. "I haven't replied yet," Emma said, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to," Sarah said, sitting down beside her. "You don't owe him an answer. He's the one who messed up. He's the one who has to prove he can be trusted. Emma glanced at the phone again, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the screen. She wanted to make the right choice. But right now, the uncertainty was suffocating. She had always been the one who put everyone else first. She had always been the one to try to fix things. But this time it was different. She couldn't keep doing that. Not for him. Not anymore. Maybe I should just tell him it's over, Emma said, her voice a little more firm this time, though there was still a flicker of doubt. Maybe that's the right thing to do. Just tell him it's done, and I'll move on. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the baby in the bassinet. That's what he deserves, right? She asked softly, her words gentle but unyielding. After everything he put you through, maybe it is. But the real question is, what do you deserve? Emma looked at Sarah, her throat tightening with emotion. I don't even know anymore, she confessed. I don't know what I deserve. All I know is that I can't keep doing this alone. I can't keep pretending like it doesn't hurt. Sarah reached out, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. You don't have to pretend. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to feel lost. But you also need to remember that you are so much stronger than you think. You've been through so much already, Emma. You don't have to let him come back and break you again. You're worth so much more than that. Emma exhaled shakily, feeling a wave of emotion crash over her. She had been so focused on trying to figure out what to do about Thomas that she had lost sight of herself. Of what she really needed. I just want this to be easier, she murmured. I just want to know what the right choice is. Sarah smiled softly. You don't have to know yet. You're still figuring it out. But remember, no matter what you decide, you've already proven you can handle whatever comes next. You're not alone in this, Emma. You have me. You have your son. And that's everything. The weight of Sarah's words lingered in the room, and for a moment, Emma allowed herself to just breathe. The guilt, the shame, the overwhelming need for things to be perfect, they could wait. Right now, she was a mother, and that was enough. She had already given everything she had to this new life, and no man, no matter what promises he made, could change that. Still, the decision loomed. I don't know if I should meet him, Emma said after a long silence. But I'm scared that if I don't, I'll regret it. What if this is my last chance to make it work? Sarah's expression softened. That's the thing about life, Emma. You can't live your life based on what-ifs. You can't let him manipulate you with guilt. You have to make the choice that feels right for you, not what feels right for him. You owe it to yourself and your son to make that choice. But take your time. There's no rush. Emma nodded slowly, her mind whirling. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't keep living in this state of limbo. She had to make a decision. She had to stop waiting for Thomas to fix things, and start taking control of her own life again. She didn't know what the future held, but she did know this: she was a mother now, and that meant something. She couldn't keep waiting for him to show up. She couldn't keep waiting for him to change. She had to move forward, one way or another. Later that afternoon, after Sarah had left, Emma sat alone in the sterile, quiet room, holding her baby in her arms. The small room felt bigger now, as if the walls were closing in, as if everything was shifting and changing in ways she couldn't control. But she had control over one thing: her decision. And for the first time in days, Emma felt a small flicker of certainty spark inside her. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. It was another message from Thomas. I know you're probably angry. And I get it. But I really want to fix this, Emma. I can't do it alone. Please, let's talk. The words felt hollow. Like a plea. Like an attempt to soften the truth. Emma's fingers hovered over the screen for a long moment. Her heart was heavy, but her mind was clear. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need his empty promises. What she needed was something real. She hit delete. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but in that moment, Emma realized something. She was done waiting for him. She was done letting him dictate the terms of her life. She wasn't going to let him back in just because he was asking. She wasn't going to let him back in just because he said the right things. She was moving forward, not back. Emma set the phone down gently and looked at her baby. She smiled, the first real smile in days, and whispered, "We're going to be okay." She didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know if she had made the right choice. But she knew that she had chosen herself. And that, for now, was enough. The weeks after Emma deleted Thomas's message were quieter, and in some ways, they were harder. Life had returned to a rhythm of sorts, but it felt different now. Emma was no longer waiting for someone to fix things for her. She had made the choice to let go, to leave the past behind and focus on what she could control, the future. But even as she stood firm in that decision, she knew there were lingering doubts. There would always be questions she would never have answers to. There would always be a part of her that wondered what might have happened if she had given Thomas another chance. If she had met him. If she had let him try to make things right. But those were questions for another day, questions that didn't matter right now. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the baby in her arms. The tiny life she had brought into the world, alone, but not truly alone. She had made it through the hardest part of her life, and as she looked down at her son, his bright eyes staring back at her, she knew she had done the right thing. But it wasn't just about him. It was about her. For the first time in a long while, Emma wasn't just living for someone else. She was living for herself. She was living for the person she had become, the person who had survived, who had learned, who had grown. And she had learned something important through all of this. Sometimes, the hardest decision isn't the one that involves others, it's the one that forces you to choose yourself. The morning was still early when Emma heard the familiar knock on the door. It was soft, almost hesitant. It was the kind of knock that made her heart race in an instant, because it was a knock she hadn't heard in weeks. It was Thomas. She froze for a moment, the baby resting in her arms, the weight of her decision still heavy on her shoulders. After everything, after she had made her choice, after deleting his messages, after telling herself that she was better off without him, here he was again. He had found her. Emma's thoughts raced. What was he doing here? Hadn't she made it clear that she wasn't ready to go back to him? Was this some kind of last-ditch effort? Was he going to apologize again, beg for forgiveness one last time? A part of her felt a surge of anger, like a fire flickering to life in the pit of her stomach. But then she looked at her son. Her son, who had no idea of the conflict that was unfolding just outside the door, and that anger quickly dissolved. She couldn't let herself be consumed by this. She had to stay calm. She had to stay in control. Taking a deep breath, she stood up slowly, cradling her son against her chest, and walked to the door. The moment she opened it, Thomas was standing there, looking much like she remembered, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes uncertain, his expression a mixture of guilt and something else, something Emma couldn't quite place. "Hey," he said softly, his voice almost apologetic before he even said anything. Emma crossed her arms, standing tall, her posture unyielding. "What are you doing here?" Thomas hesitated for a moment, as though trying to find the right words. "I know it's been a while. I need to talk to you." "About what?" she asked, her tone cool but not unkind. She wasn't sure she was ready for this conversation, but she knew it had to happen at some point. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything," he began, his eyes flickering toward the baby in her arms. "About you, about the baby, about what I did. I know I messed up, Emma. I know I hurt you. And I'm sorry. But I don't want to just walk away from all of this. Emma felt the air around her grow heavy with his words. He didn't have the right to ask anything of her. Not anymore. But as she looked at him, there was something in his eyes, something that made her hesitate. He was vulnerable, yes. But was that enough? Was it enough to rebuild what had been broken? She swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. I'm not here to listen to another apology, Thomas. I've heard enough of those. He nodded, his expression softening with what seemed like regret. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect you to even want to talk to me. But I just need you to know that I'm here now. I want to be a part of our son's life. I know I don't deserve that chance, but I want to try. I want to make it right. For a moment, Emma just stood there, watching him. The words were almost familiar, the same words he had said before. But something had shifted inside her. She wasn't the same person who had fallen for these promises once. She wasn't the same woman who had allowed herself to be swept up in the idea of a perfect future. The future was never perfect. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, it was painful. But that didn't mean it wasn't worth living. I don't know if I can trust you again, Thomas, Emma said, her voice steady but firm. You hurt me. You left me when I needed you the most. I don't know if I can let that go. His eyes darkened with regret, but he didn't look away. I know. And I'm sorry for that. But what I'm asking for isn't just forgiveness. It's a chance. A chance to prove that I can be the father he deserves, the man you deserve. I don't expect everything to be okay overnight. But I need you to believe me when I say that I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Emma held his gaze for a long moment, her mind a swirling storm of emotions. Could she really do this? Could she open herself up again to the possibility of hurt? Could she trust him enough to allow him to be a part of their son's life? And then, just as quickly as the thought came, it was gone. She didn't have all the answers. She wasn't sure what the future held. But she knew one thing for certain, her son deserved the chance to have a father, whether that father was perfect or not. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. I'm not saying I'm ready to forgive you, she said slowly, her voice softening. But I'm willing to give you a chance. For him. For our son. Thomas's face softened, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude. I won't let you down, Emma. I promise you. Emma nodded, but her heart wasn't completely at ease. There was still a long road ahead of them, filled with questions, doubts, and fears. But for now, this was a step forward, a step toward healing. As she looked at him, she realized something profound. She had already healed. She had already moved on. She had built a life for herself, one that didn't depend on anyone but her. And whether Thomas stayed in their lives or not, that wouldn't change. Let's take it one day at a time, she said, her voice steady. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for actions. Show me that you can be here. That's all I need. Thomas nodded again, and for the first time, Emma felt a flicker of hope. Not because of him, but because of herself. She had made it through the hardest part. She had learned how to live for herself. And that strength would carry her through whatever came next. She closed the door behind her, turning back to her son. The weight of the world still rested on her shoulders, but now, it didn't feel as heavy. She had made the right choice. She had chosen herself. And that was enough.